I'm Aryeh Schwartz, and welcome to the Winsidr Show, where it's all about the W, the team everybody has been waiting for, the Indiana Fever. Matt Cohen joins me today to discuss the team making headlines all over the world, so let's hop in. Welcome back to the show. Matt, I got a fever, and there's only one prescription, and that's WNBA basketball 2024. So exciting if you're an Indiana Fever fan. I was saying this before. This might be a ridiculous statement. I'm probably going to say it a few more times throughout this season. Might be the most exciting time ever in Indiana Fever basketball history. And I'm well aware of their amazing basketball history and their championship and their days of Tamika Catchings. But to have this many superstars, household names, the excitement has to be, through the roof. Matt, real quickly, very briefly, rundown, summarize last year for the Indiana Fever.
Yeah, the Fever last year finished 13-27. They were 10th overall, so they fell within the lottery and found themselves with the number one overall pick in the 2024 draft.
And I want to remind all of our friends who are listening, make sure you check out the show notes for our sponsor and affiliate links. If you're getting WNBA merch, make sure you use our links. Helps us, helps them, helps everybody. We just started working with some online sports books, so definitely check that out. Again, it's in our show notes. And if you have a gambling problem, please get some help. Use the phone number in the show notes. So briefly, as we do, we're going to run through who they lost, who they gained. There's some noticeable names that they have gained this offseason. Who they lost: Matt Caldwell, Emma Cannon, Amanda Zawi B. Who they gained: Damiris Dantas, Katie Lou, Temi. I'm going to say technically because she, joined the team, is actually going to be on the team now. Caitlin Clark and Celeste Taylor. And so, Matt, who do you think, as we ask for all the teams, which player added to this team is going to be the most impactful, do you think?
And I hate to go with what everybody already knows, but it's really hard to look and find a player that is going to have a bigger impact than Caitlin Clark. And I think, when you take her number one overall, you know exactly what you're going to get from your top overall pick. And you know exactly the kind of player that Caitlin Clark is. She took the world by storm in college at Iowa, had an unbelievable career, one of the best to ever do it. And now she comes into the WNBA with incredible expectations and with hundreds of thousands, if not millions more eyes all looking at her and what she's about to do. And so on a team that has Nalissa Smith and Aaliyah Boston, shout out to Hoosier great Grace Berger, this team is on the rise and looking to make the playoffs for the first time in some time.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy because you look at this team and I think the Dallas Wings of recent, I think the Seattle Storm a few years back, teams that throughout years, Vegas honestly also a few years back, teams that were down on their luck, had prolonged periods of time where they got good draft picks or they hit home runs at a variety of different areas. Everyone has a different way of doing it, but building through the draft and then adding complementary pieces through free agency over the years. This team has shooting. This team has size. This team has speed. This team has youthful energy. What are the questions for this team? Because I feel like the simple answer to what's the state of this team right now is have fun and grow. But what are the questions? Because I think it's easy for people who watch college basketball or people who, are fans of specific players to look at this team and think, oh, we're going for a championship this year. What are some kind of back to earth moments or thoughts when you think of this team?
So I think above most things when we think about teams on the rise, and we've been talking about this a lot for a lot of the teams already, and that's how are they going to come together, right? And so you look at a player like Caitlin Clark, who's played with some phenomenal players, but now she's getting to play with, WNBA great players, professionals in this league. How is she going to come in and find her role? How are they going to flow and gel offensively? How are they going to be able to space the floor? What is going to happen when a lot of attention goes to Caitlin Clark? How is she going to find the ball to Kelsey Mitchell, how is she going to find the ball to Erica Wheeler, to Aaliyah Boston, to Nalissa Smith? How is that ball going to be able to move around? They were 10th last year in 3 points made. I think that's going to definitely change. Obviously, with Clark just putting up tons more shots and taking a lot more attention from the defense. And then speaking of defense, this is an area that Indiana is going to have to improve on. They had a lot of really poor metrics defensively. I'm not going to get into all of them, but a lot of like 10th, 11th, 12th places in opponents' points and this and that and the other. The defense is good. They're going to need to learn how to come together defensively. They can put up as many points as they want to, but if they can't stop the ball, they're going to lose these close games. They're going to continue to find difficulty in getting out of neutral. And so for me, not just how do they gel offensively, but more to the point, what is head coach Christy Sides putting together for the defensive structure? And will this team buy into it to be more accountable on that end of the floor?
Yeah. I mean, I look at this team and I think equally about the defense, because obviously that's going to be a concern. I'm less concerned. When I think about Caitlin Clark, I think her passing ability is going to be highlighted this season more so than necessarily her shooting, because of the likes of a Nalissa Smith and Aaliyah Boston going to make her look better. And what I mean by that is she has two amazing co-captains to go with her to make big shots, to take advantage of double teams or pressure on her. And her passing is elite. And when you have great players who get the ball in great position, they look even better. There's so many times where we've looked at some of the greatest passers in league history, thinking Lindsay Whalen, Sue Bird, and some of these others. You get the ball. Chelsea Gray, perfect example. Modern, perfect example. You put the ball in a place that leads the player to where they need to go. Sometimes the player's not even ready for it. So I'm going to look for some growing pains. I know in the past, Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark have played together, but I'm kind of excited to see how the complementary pieces add into this. I know there was a lot of hoopla about like Nalissa Smith not getting enough love. If anybody's been watching the Indiana Fever or Nalissa Smith, you understand what her game is and why she's going to be so important. I was saying this before the draft happened. I think Nalissa Smith might be the biggest star on this team this year because of the attention other players are going to get. And that's going to open up where they're going to have to pick their poison. And I think you're going to see opportunities for her that she didn't see in the past. And her skill set is to take advantage of that, get downhill, be aggressive, make big time shots, crash the boards. And also she's not that bad of a passer herself. Who's the player who you think is going to feed this team off the bench?
What the starting lineup is going to look like, I think, is going to be critical in terms of, is Christy going to find something, or she already found something early on, or is she still figuring out those rotations? And so it might be Lexi Hall is coming off the bench. It could be that Erica Wheeler might find herself coming off the bench. And so I think for the first time in some time, Indiana has a little bit of depth to be able to play with. For me, I think it's going to be Katie Lou Samuelson. Now, I was critical a little bit about it because I'm not a big fan of giving that much money to these sort of middle tier players, especially when Caitlin was probably going to be coming in here, and the opportunity then for you to be able to fill a roster around her. But Katie coming back after a year off from her pregnancy is going to be really critical to see what she's going to be able to do. She can stretch the floor. She's a critical veteran to help bring some stability to that second unit, and can even fill in a pinch if there's injuries or inconsistencies in the starting rotation. Katie Lou can step up. And so the Samuelson sisters, they're tough. They're gritty. They're good, hard-nosed players. I think Katie Lou found herself a nice role on this team. She carved it out in training camp, and she's going to be a critical piece to what the Fever can do off the bench.
Yeah, I guess for me, I think something that's important for this, because this season isn't the goal of winning it. Like, yes, every season the goal is winning a championship. I don't think it's realistic to have that expectation for this team. I'm looking for this team to set a tone early for these young players to make this season a jump off point for their careers for this Indiana Fever team. Yes, have fun. Caitlin Clark, get good habits as you enter this league, because habits start from day one, from your first game. Find a vibe with your three-headed monster and start to drive forward. Uh, and look at this team no longer as the Indiana Fever that we've known them to be over the past years, but to be more in that mindset of becoming a dynasty. You're a dynasty in the making. You have the youth movement and the star power to be that. You need to will it. And that happens game by game, year by year. What are what are your expectations? What are your hopes? What are your dreams for this team?
I think if you're looking at where the Fever are now versus where we expect them to be come end of the season is a lot of what we've been talking about already, is players figuring out what their roles are, is how does Christy Sides work to get the ball spread across Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Alyssa Smith? How does she able to utilize players like Grace Berger and Alexi Hall, who can lock down defensively and help bring some energy and stability to that side of the floor? How does she weave in other players like a Katie Lou Samuelson if Celeste Taylor is still on this squad later down the season? How is she able to bring these players together where everyone has their role and is contributing? And, big offensive players more like Erica Wheeler and Kelsey Mitchell. And so for me, the expectation is I'm certainly not expecting them to be in the top half of this league. But what I do expect them to be is in that playoff hunt, in that 6, 7, 8 range, where I think this team, if they're able to come together and gel on both sides of the ball, is a very real possibility, of course, pending injuries. And so if you come out and you're still scoring even, about what you were last year, probably more with a player like Caitlin Clark, but your defense is still dragging and pulling you down and losing you these close games, that's not where this team needs to be. So my hope is that this team is going to figure out something defensively, even if you're able to shave off, 7 or 8 points off of what you were offering up last year to the opponents. That's going to give you another 2 or 3 wins probably, and that can continue to help push you up and put you in that 6, 7, or 8 range. So for me, expectations are this team gels and comes together. The hope is that they're a playoff team and that they can probably secure that 7 or 8 spot if everything goes right.
Hearing you talk about this roster, I want to ask you this because you have some coaching history. Talk to me about some fun lineups that this team could do. Like, just put on your artistic hat and start swathing up some Van Goghs for me. Tell me, what are some fun pairs that you see on this roster? Because I think a lot of people are just thinking about Alyssa Smith, Caitlin Clark, and Aaliyah Boston, but they got some other players on this team. Because that's only 3 players. What are some other players you can play in there? What are some rotations that you can do that'll be exciting? Because those players can't play 40 minutes every game.
Right. I think you could throw in a Kelsey Mitchell, who can also be an offensive star on this team and take some of that pressure. So now you have 4 players that can all score. And that's, there you have some difficulty of who you guard. And you bring maybe an Erica Wheeler in the mix. And now you've got 5 players who can do a lot of everything and can find different ways to make that happen. If you're pulling one of those out, you can put in a Grace Berger and a Lexi Hull for some defensive responsibility in the backcourt, knowing that Aaliyah Boston and Alyssa Smith will have to work off each other to figure out defensively in that regard. If Celeste Taylor is going to be here for a while, she's another great backcourt defender. And so I think this team can find a lot of different pairings, and I think a lot of that can start with what is happening in the backcourt defensively for this team first, to then allow to take some pressure off of needing Aaliyah Boston to, come, to help off a screen or whatever the case is, or Alyssa Smith, or give Caitlin some help. And so I think bringing in those kind of players will certainly help. But you can also bring Katie Lou off the bench and bring Katie Lou and Kelsey with Alyssa Smith and Aaliyah Boston, and that's going to stretch the floor a little bit. And now, teams are being forced to pull out and guard more, across the break. And so there's a lot of different things that Chrissy Sides can do depending on the situation. Is she going to want to go a little bit more defensively? Is she going to want to go a little smaller? Because she can go a little bit smaller. If Aaliyah Boston's going to have to sit for a little bit, you can have Melissa be the 5 and then everyone else be small and stretch the floor. Or do you want to play more half-court ball and let Alyssa Smith either work the post or Aaliyah work the post, and one of them is, stretched out to the weak side corner? And so Chrissy Sides, she's got options, and I'm interested. That's one of the first things I'm going to be looking for, Tuesday night and on this week. They have 3 games, I think, in the first week. I want to know, what are these rotations?
And how I guess how much do you expect this team? I guess I shouldn't ask you what you expect, right? Because there's so many unknowns, especially when you have such a superstar coming in like this. But I guess from watching the team last year, do you think that it's going to be a similar style of play now plugging in a Caitlin Clark? Or do you think was the style of play the perfect fit for Caitlin Clark? Are they going to be adjusting their style of play to fit into a superstar like that? Or how do you see that into combining what people have known from watching this team last year to what they should expect this year, kind of, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Rachel and I were talking a little bit about it after the last preseason game for the Fever about, what were some of the sets and actions that Christie was running for Caitlin, and was this somewhat different or the same? And I think there were some pieces that were actually very similar, some Iverson cuts and different kinds of pick and roll situations that really were being run for Kelsey Mitchell that were then a little bit more structured for what Caitlin can do. Now, given that Caitlin has, as you called it, that elite passing and that elite vision ability to see, the roller or whatever the case is, maybe a little bit better than where Kelsey Mitchell is at. I think that's where the change is going to be. The initial action might be the same as what it's been. So a pick and roll or a pick and pop or the Iverson cut for Caitlin to get her open across the free throw line, whatever it might be, that initial action might be the same. But then what's going to change is what that secondary action is. What's the weak side doing? What is the roller doing? Or are they popping? Because if it's Melissa Smith with a pick and pop with Caitlin, that's going to be so deadly. And I think that's where offensively there might be a couple of extra actions there that where Caitlin can then see who's getting open, whether it's her or is it the roller or whatever the case is. It's going to give her an opportunity to find more offense. And I think one thing this team needs is a little bit more efficiency on the offensive end. And so the initial actions look to be somewhat the same, but the secondary and the tertiary actions and what's happening on the weak side, I think is going to change a little bit to allow Caitlin to find those players for easy scores.
Oh, I like that. All right, I got 3 questions for you. Question number 1, Caitlin Clark will average how many points per game this season, prediction-wise?
I'm going to say somewhere in the 16 to 18 points range. I think she's going to contribute for sure. I think there's no way she's not, as long as she's healthy and obviously will be a starter on this team. But I think she's going to have difficult moments. I think there's going to be some games where the defense is locked in. She's going to be getting more in the 9 to 14 range. But I think then she's going to have games where she's really lighting it up, where defenses just can't slow her down. And I think that's going to come in the 20 to 25 point range, maybe 28. I think she'll get a 30 burger in there at some point, if not multiple. And so I'm going to say be a little more conservative and say, because we have an Aaliyah Boston and Alyssa Smith and other scorers, I'm going to say she's going to average somewhere in the 16 to 18 range and probably be just fine.
My other questions, the combo of Alyssa Smith, Aaliyah Boston will rank where in terms of, post presence, rebounding, a pair in the league?
I'm going to say top 3, maybe 4. I think with Caitlin Clark shooting as many threes as we know that she does, and listen, she makes pretty darn good amount of those. But this is still the W. The defense is going to be better. And I think there's going to be times where she might be feeling some of that pressure and she might force up some of those shots. And I think Christie is certainly going to be working within the system to help Alyssa and Aaliyah be in the right position for rebounding. Both of them are excellent rebounders. Alyssa is one of the best offensive rebounders in the league. And I think with just the amount of shooting that I'm expecting this team to put up, again, Katie, Lou Samuelson, and Lexi's going to be shooting threes and all these other opportunities for all these players, not to mention Caitlin, is going to give this team opportunities for rebounding. And I would say that those two are probably going to be in the top 3 or 4 in terms of total rebounds combined.
Out of 40 games, how many double-doubles is Aaliyah Boston going to have?
28.
Damn, I was going to say 30.
I'm going to say 28.
I was thinking 28 or 30, and then you said 20. I was going to go below you by 1 or 2 to be the jerk.
I was just going to say, I think she's really going to take a step forward. When you get a generational talent like a Caitlin Clark, it's going to open so much. We've been talking about it this whole pod. It's going to open up so much for her, and the opportunities for her to score off a secondary defender or even a tertiary defender that would have normally been the primary or secondary last season is now going to be spread out. And I think it's just going to allow Aaliyah to be able to operate in a space where it's going to be more comfortable for her. It's going to feel a little bit more like South Carolina for her, where she's got so many of these players around her who can do so many things. And so for Aaliyah, I think she's just gonna get fed by Caitlin time and time again off the pick and roll. And she's going to be cleaning up after some Nalissa Smith awesome moves at the bucket. She's going to be cleaning up after dribble drives from Erica Wheeler and Caitlin's, errant threes, the occasional one she misses. So I think Leah Boss, I'm going to go 28.
Nalissa Smith, is she going to average more points a game or rebounds plus assists a game?
Ooh, good question.
Because she's a stat stuffer that people like. We're getting attention to her game, and she gets attention on rebounding, but she does so many other things. She's a Swiss Army knife player. Some games she's not going to have that much, but she's going to find ways to impact a game in a variety of ways. So I was just trying to find like a different stat to add to it.
I love that question. I'm still going to say points. Across the 40 games, I'm going to say Nalissa Smith is going to average more points than rebounds and assists combined. Her skill set is incredible. Her offensive bag is as deep and as diverse as not just any post player, but certainly any player in this league. And her rim package in terms of what she's able to do at the rim and the moves that she's able to make, and the outside, all of it. She's going to find ways to score at all three levels. Wherever Caitlin is not, Nalissa will be there. And it's going to be just an unbelievable opportunity for them to be so successful together. Nalissa, I think, is going to average in the 22, 23 range. And probably rebounds and assists will be somewhere like 17 and a half-ish area.
That's the crazy thing is I expect all three of them to average like 16 plus. And like part of me says Nalissa might be the leading scorer on this team per game on average. That's maybe it's the hot take. Maybe it's the lukewarm take. That's I've been letting it kind of dance on my tongue till I decided it. Any final thoughts on the Indiana Fever?
I'm excited. Not just to see Caitlin. I think we all are, and to see all that she's able to accomplish in the league in her first year. But I'm looking forward to seeing Nalissa Smith and how she's going to adapt to a team that has these two stars additional to her. How is Aaliyah Boston going to grow in year two? How are the bench players going to come together? How is my biggest thing? I think might be just how Christie is going to fill out the rotations and what actions is she running? Is she running certain sets specific for different players at different times? Or is it just we run the action and whoever has the open shot takes it? I'll be really curious to see how it comes together. My big concern is defense, and that's what I want to know. I want to know, is this team going to be able to put it together defensively? But I'm telling you right now, they can. I think their ceiling is a 6 seed, maybe a 5 if they get really lucky. But this team is a playoff team this year if all could come together.
If they can stay healthy, I agree with you. I don't know if I'll go as high as 5, but hey, if the dice land the way they land, Matt, who's your GOAT?
Because we're talking about the Fever, Tamika Catchings.